Today's guest says that the 800 is the hardest event in track to coach, and after my conversation with him, he might be right. Tom Brumlik is the 800-meter coach for Under Armour's Mission Run team. I got connected to Tom after he saw the effectiveness the Under Armour distance team was having with their lever system, and Tom instantly knew how he wanted to incorporate the lever with his half-mile team. Listen in to understand why this middle distance team lives on the lever on Mondays and the performance benefits they've seen since incorporating the system. All right, Tom Brumlik, thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I think the best way to start this one today would just be, giving us a little bit of background of who you are and what you're currently up to.
Yeah, I am the coach of the Baltimore 800 group with Under Armour here in Baltimore, Maryland. We moved here about a year and a half ago. Our group started back in 2016, all different distances. We had an athlete qualify to the Olympic trials in the marathon and the 800 in our first year. So kind of like most other groups that have started, in the last, decade or so, try to do all the events, but realized it was a little bit tougher to recruit distance runners to the East Coast, and started having a little bit more success with the 800. Personally, I like coaching that event the most. So yeah, just kind of naturally happened where we ended up being a 800 meter specific group. Probably around 2021, we kind of made that change. But yeah, a little bit unique compared to some other groups.
Yeah, definitely a little unique. And, part of that transition that we'll talk about here in a second is just, you helped start the district track club that did morph into this Baltimore 800 that we'll talk about here shortly. But you've been coaching now for about a decade, a little over a decade. Is that right?
2010 is when I started, I think, maybe a little bit before that. So I think, around coming up on 15 years. Yep.
Awesome. And 800 primarily that whole time, like middle distance?
So I started coaching on the high school level, actually, while I was still competing. I competed at a Division III school, Otterbein, right outside of Columbus, Ohio. Sophomore year, going into my junior year, I wanted to start getting into coaching. I found a local club, and the coach just so happened to coach at a high school. Went to the high school to meet him, and realized they had no coaches, or not a ton of coaches, and asked if he needed any help with the high school team, and ended up that was my start in coaching. The distance coach left I think the year after I started, so took over coaching the distance runners there, and I was there at Westville North High School for 5 years, and then moved to DC to coach at American University with Coach Matt Centrowitz from there, and he and I started the club together from that point.
Awesome. Well, we typically open these podcasts with a question around what is the why behind why you run? But, since you've been in the coaching space now for a decade and a half, we'll frame it a little differently. What's the why behind why you coach?
Yeah. I just love competition. Kind of always have. And that's what drives me. I also love helping other people reach their best. And that to me is coaching. So yeah, I would say competition and trying to help people be the best versions of themselves.
Awesome. No, that's good. And I think, super important values to have as a coach too, especially when, just seeing athlete success and wanting the best for them. And it's definitely, it's probably not an easy job at all times. And you have to play the long game, the sustainable long game a lot too. So, definitely a good mission to keep you driving forward. So at American University, when you met Matt Centrowitz Senior, is that where this like district track club kind of morphed out of that, or like a brainchild of that coaching experience with Matt Senior?
Yeah, so he just, I don't know if you know the history or if your listeners know the history, but back in the 90s, I think it went till the early 2000s, the Reebok Enclave, him and Coach Frank Gagliano ran that club together and had a, really incredible history in DC. So picked up a lot of lessons from how he kind of started that group. And at that time, Carrie Gallagher, who I was working with at American University, she was a high level post collegiate athlete, and turned into a professional athlete with Nike. As a 419 athlete coming out of college, got all the way down to 403 and made the U.S. team in 20, I think it was 2015. And I kind of got to see her progress over the years. Sharing a desk with her, and so between hearing about all the stories with the Enclave, between Coach Centrowitz and Matthew Centrowitz, obviously that's right around the time, a couple years before, or when I was there, a couple years before Matthew won the Olympic gold medal. So kind of all those things together were a huge motivation of why I kind of saw myself more in the professional space than the collegiate space. And then in terms of how it actually started, I'm pretty sure, and if people know Coach Centrowitz, I'm pretty sure he wrote down this plan on a bar napkin. So I met him out one night. He was in a dart league, and we were talking about my long-term goals. The reason I went there was to learn from him, and initially to get a college job, but kind of he was asking about my long-term goals. Told him my thoughts have kind of switched. I actually had to do a thesis in my master's program at AU, and I was going to make it kind of this project of a sustainable professional track club, because again, the part about the Enclave was it was a great group, but it ended up folding just because of funding eventually. So a lot of our conversations revolved around creating a group, but trying to create a group that could sustain the test of time, which is really, really tough in our sport. But having a mentor like him, and then we also met. He already knew, but I met a guy by the name of Drew Mearns, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. But Drew was kind of our third partner in this whole project, and Drew. So Coach Centrowitz to me is one of the best coaching minds I've ever met. Drew on the other side is one of the best sports business minds I've ever met. He's actually one of the first agents in the sport of track and field. Represented Sebco, Alberto Salazar, Bill Rogers, a huge who's who of some of the best athletes in our sport. So I got to be mentored by Coach Centrowitz on the coaching side, and Drew Mearns on the sports business side to kind of help guide me along in creating this group with them.
That's really cool. So I even had a question down here about who were your coaching mentors, and I think you kind of just answered that question pretty well. But why do you look up to Coach Matt Centrowitz Sr. so much? Like, what was it about him or his training philosophy, how he interacted with athletes? Like, what was it about him that you really looked up to?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the beginning of my why, and he's kind of we couldn't be more opposite people. He's from the Bronx. He was fast. I was slow. We're just two very, very different people. Big age gap. But I just see the sport the same way that he does. And it goes back to that why of again, being competitive. He's one of the more competitive people I met from a coaching perspective, and from having a really high standards perspective. I think the first when I first met him, it was right after Matthew whenever he got silver. I think that was 2013 going into 2014. And he goes, "What do you think about the race?" And I go, "Oh, I thought he ran the perfect race." He goes, "Son, no, the perfect race would have been winning." And I was like, "All right, okay, that's different perspective, right?" So yeah, that like commitment to excellence, and the when he truly locks in with an athlete, he pushes people. Again, when I saw him with helping Carrie Gallagher. She wasn't always happy with him because he's a really really tough coach, but it was crazy to see again the development from 419 to 403 and how he was able to kind of bring the best out of her and help her find her greatness. So those few little things are again what made him yeah, definitely my biggest influence in coaching.
That's great. And I think, especially being able to start your career that way, like learning like from some of the best in the business is just such an invaluable way to really get started. And it's going to springboard you. And honestly, we'll probably even get there in this conversation, but the things that you're doing today are awesome. Right. And so, so district track club, had it for a few years, 2016, I think you said 2017, it really got off the ground. Did you bring in the athletes that you guys wanted to bring in at the time? I know it's probably not the easiest sell in the world to bring in elite athletes, but I guess, walk us through some of those early years at the
Yeah,
district.
no, really, really tough recruiting. So our sell year one was so Drew's son worked for a company that um, you drive lost luggage around DC and the surrounding areas, kind of like Uber. So I did this job too with our athletes. You show up to the airport and they give you these runs, and Drew was thinking it was like this next big thing, and we were going to be in like the early stages of it, and it was going to be our athletes were going to get $25 an hour. Um, Maybe one day they got $25 an hour, but most days you probably get like $5 or $6 an hour, and you're driving around DC and stuff like that. So our pitch to these athletes were, you'll have a job, and this was the job, and we'll figure out, travel, and we'll figure out like if you're ready to go to a meet, we'll get you to that meet, and if you need gear, we'll get you gear, and that was pretty much it. So that was our recruiting pitch. A lot of local athletes. Again, one of our athletes that's still here today, Ido Sebedine, who's probably had our the most success in our program. Currently has the Olympic standard going into Paris, ran 144.6 last year in year 8, I think 8 or 9 or something like that. I think this is year 9. But yeah, he was kind of one of our original athletes, and I recruited him because I thought he could be good, but the main reason we recruited him because he was right down the road, and he was able to make it here because he was able to live at home. So got really lucky with a he was only a 148 athlete in high school or in college, and ended up just developing really really well. Ran 146 in his first year. So the only bigger athlete that really took a chance on us year one, again that wasn't local. We had some pretty solid local athletes that just made a quick trip down. But Sam Penzenstadler from Loyola Chicago, he's a 339 guy back when 339 was fast, and got third at NCAA's in a really really competitive race, and closed I think in 154. So he was a huge he was a pretty big pickup for us at that time, and yeah, really just took a chance on our program, and I think he's one of the reasons why we were able to grow. In addition, with a guy like Eidos, and it took us a while to actually get some high level female athletes. Claudia Saunders, Stanford graduate, top all American a couple times in the 800 out of college. Same thing, just really took a chance on us when we were early in our program, and came and joined in I think 2018. So yeah, really, really tough to recruit those first couple of years. It was the pitch that we said. It was, you're not going to go hungry, you're not going to have a roof over your head, but it was every single week, just every single month, just trying to figure out, how we're going to make it and things like that. But yeah, over time, our team got a little bit better, support increased, and that's kind of how we ended up here today.
Yeah. So when did the relationship with Under Armour start?
Yeah, so I was always attracted to working with UA from the beginning. They were right up the road, and they were kind of new into the sport of running around that time. Around 2016, again, our team was a little too slow, and their product was not quite there. So the relationship didn't make sense. Hannah Troff, who I who's still to this day our liaison, and Jamie Christ, who was with her, but I think moved on from the brand a couple of years ago. I met them back in 2016, and we kind of, had conversations. And again, they weren't quite ready to commit to working with a team. And again, we probably weren't a team worth sponsoring at that point. So the product got a little bit better. So they put more support into the sport over the next couple of years, and we got a little bit better around 2019. So 2019 is when we officially started working with UA, and the relationship's been growing, has been growing ever since.
Yeah, and obviously growing fairly significantly. Sounds like you definitely moved the team from DC to Baltimore at the headquarters of Under Armour. What has been that transition like for the team? Was that an easy move to make from DC? I mean, it sounds like you had a few athletes also follow you to Baltimore. Was that a pretty easy move
Yeah.
for the team to make?
Yeah, majority of our team from 2022 to 2023 moved up to Baltimore. Really appreciate them, making a life change like that. And it's only an hour, drive, hour and a half drive, but still a tough thing to do, because we had a really good setup down in DC, and some really good relationships, and athletes had coaching jobs, and again, we just had roots down there, and it's really, really tough to make a change. But athletes did a really, really good job with that. And biggest reason we wanted to move up here was to be a part of what UA is building, and to continue to try to be the best possible athlete representatives, and best possible program that we possibly can be for the brand. But yeah, they're building a new headquarters in Port Covington, or Baltimore Peninsula, I think they renamed it to, and it should be done in the fall of this year, actually. And really wanted to be a part of that, and just really wanted to continue to grow our relationship with them, because I think they've just done a really, really great job of, again, from where they were in 2016 to where they are now with their product, and the impact they're making in the sport has been quite a change. So we're really, really, again, always tough to move and change, but I think the motivation is just to be a part of something bigger than yourself, and that's how we feel being with the brand.
Yeah, and then so team dynamics today. I talked to Corey Leslie the other day, and he's taken the middle, the 1500 meter and up group, and it sounds like you really kind of are this focus on the 800 specifically. Was there like a reason behind that? Obviously, like 800 runners are fairly interesting from the standpoint of, like, they could either be coming from the sprint world, they could be coming down in distance from that 1500 meter world. I guess, was there any like reason behind that specificity and that focus on just having an 800 team?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned we were, had it all in the beginning. From again, first year we had a qualifier to Olympic trials in the 800, and a qualifier to the Olympic trials in the marathon. But over time, from a recruiting perspective, we, because we were having a little bit of success in that event, had a lot more interest from a support perspective. I truly believe that, and I don't know why, but I think the 800 is one of the most under-supported events on the track. I know jumpers and throwers and field events, they would kill me if they hear me say that, because I know that field events are by far one of the most and under-supported events in our sport. But if I'm talking on the track, middle distance, down to the sprints, on the flats, the 800, I think, for how exciting an event it is, I think it's pretty under-supported, and that's why I really appreciate Under Armour kind of taking a chance on supporting one event, the 800, and things like that. But yeah, in terms of why I'm attracted to the event, I just think it's super complex within our group. we have 3 to 4 different like types of athletes, what I call training groups. Your 400, 800 athlete, your 800 specific athlete, and your 815 type athlete. We've had athletes that have run, have been All-Americans in cross country, and we've had athletes that have been All-Americans on 4x4s on the college level. So the amount of nuance and just like coaching that goes into coaching one event is, again, if I go back to my why, like from a competitive standpoint or from a challenge standpoint, I think it's probably the hardest event to coach. And I guess I don't have a bunch of experience coaching different events because I've only coached distance and middle distance. But yeah, there's never a day where I feel like I have it figured out. Where I feel like again, I'm confident in our program. I'm confident in what we do, but I just think the moment that you think you have this event figured out, there's another there's just a different person that presents a different complex issue that you have to solve. So yeah, it just to me, distance running is boring. No offense to Corey and Coach Rogers. When I coached cross country in high school and even on the college level, I was always waiting for track to start. For coaching, I would say even to this day, I probably coaching a state championship 4x8 is probably one of the most fun things to do as a coach. So yeah, I've always just been attracted to the complexity event, the amount of different skills and knowledge that you have to understand the event. Because again, you got to be a sprint coach and you have to be a distance coach. So yeah, that's probably what attracted me to the event specifically.
Yeah, it sounds complex. I mean, especially like you mentioned, there's so many different ways to train for it. I'd love to take, again, a few minutes to talk through what that actually looks like for your team. Like, what does a week of training look like? Are you guys like on a 7-day, like Monday through Sunday type schedule?
Yeah, definitely Monday through Sunday, just because, and this started in DC, of it's just really hard to do anything on the weekends. So I know Corey and does 9-day cycle, and there's a lot of programs out there that do that. But we just had, especially because a lot of our athletes coach and work and things like that. So we've always just stayed with the normal week cycle, mainly out of no science behind it, just to make things simple. We'll have Saturday workouts here or there, or like a random Wednesday workout here or there. But yeah, the actual week for the most part stays the same throughout the entire year. I'd say one of the biggest philosophies I try to operate with is we're trying to kind of touch on everything year round, whether that be speed work, whether that be base work. We're trying to do something in those categories year round, every 2 weeks or so. It's just the amount changes, or the density changes, or the intensity changes, or the focus changes throughout the year. So pretty easy way to understand our program is Monday is what I call base work. And so for most people, I go into 3 different categories. So our 815 type athletes, they're doing what you'd call a steady run. Probably the easiest way to look at it is let's say it's a 10-mile run. First 2 or 3 miles are easy, and then the last like 6 or 7 miles are going to be, for most 815 athletes, let's say anywhere from 80 seconds to anywhere from 90 seconds to 2 minutes slower than their mile pace. So a 4-minute miler running about 6-minute pace down to maybe 540 or something like that. Our middle group, they might do a steady run, or they might do some pickups on the treadmill. Pickups are kind of probably like tempo type work. And then our 4-8 athletes, and not to plug here on the Lever podcast, but our 4-8 athletes truly do live on the lever on Mondays. A lot of our 4-8 athletes are super powerful. A lot of them are, might be, we have One of our 800-meter athletes is I think probably about 50 pounds. There's probably about a 50-pound difference between some of our 815 athletes and some of our 48 athletes. So we found a lot of good success in getting athletes to be able to get a lot of volume on those Monday base work days with the lever. So for example, I can just go back to yesterday. We had some athletes doing 6x4 minutes, and all based off of heart rate, trying to be in the right zones for a steady, maybe tempo type effort. So we have some athletes, like our 800 athletes, they're doing 6x4 minutes, just straight on the treadmill with a minute rest. Our 4-8 athletes, they'll be doing 6x3 minutes on the lever with a minute rest, all trying to accomplish the two things of staying in that heart rate zone and accumulating as much volume as possible. So that's Monday. Again, very basic aerobic day, and that's kind of how it looks different for each of the groups. Tuesday endurance work. That's going to early in the year, in the fall, or right now in it's March. We're going back to conditioning type work. So that day might be like what you might call a VO2 max type day, or CV type day, or just longer interval type day for a lot of our group. And again, it's going to look different based on your group. So example I'll always give is, let's say the 815 group is doing 8x1K. That middle group might be doing 4x800, and then with the group, where it might be 8x1K, or 8x1K for the 815 group on 60 seconds rest. That middle group will do, let's say, 4 800s with 90 seconds rest, so running the same pace, getting a little longer rest. And then that group will split it up and maybe do 10 to 12 200s with 30 seconds rest. And that third group, the 4-8 group, they might just do 200s the whole way through. So they might do, again, for today, for example, we had some athletes, our 4-8 group did anywhere from 20 to 25 200s. Because for them, if you're talking about working the aerobic system, it's less about speed. It's more about the distance that they're going. So a ton of 200s with short rest is probably going to be much more aerobic for them, because they struggle as the rep gets longer. So if everyone thinks longer work is usually aerobic. For that 4-8 group, not quite, at least what I found. So we've had better luck with aerobic development when we're doing short interval, short rest. Wednesday, always an easy day, recovery day. Some athletes run, some athletes cross train, some athletes do a mix. Always treatment on those days for the most part too. We have a really great massage therapy team here that Under Armour has helped us find. Thursday for most of our group is going to be a sprint day. So our 815 athletes, they might sprint only every other Thursday, and they might do another one of those steady runs one of the Thursdays. And then the other two groups will pretty much sprint every Thursdays. And when I say sprint, we're talking they're truly sprinting, 30s, 50s 1 week, and then maybe some segment runs, 40 controlled, 40 fast, with hundreds pretty fast, or 150s pretty fast after that. 2 years ago, we brought on a great strength coach, Carrie Lane. She's also really, really skilled in speed development. So she and I collaborate on the Thursday days. We've always sprinted since we started our group on those Thursday days, but she's done an incredible job of, one, helping me kind of like revamp the actual plan, the every other week plan, and two, she's just incredible when it comes to helping our athletes improve mechanics and things like that. Because those are some of the big things we're looking to do on those days, is put a lot of force into the ground, and also potentially clean up any mechanical issues that you might see in some of the race pace type work. Friday is either hill work or track work. So as we get closer to racing, we're going to be on the track doing some of your race specific type work, 1500 pace, anywhere down to 400 pace. It just kind of depends on what time of year or the athlete or what they might be getting ready for. And then during our conditioning type phase, so what we're in, so October, November, and then we go back to it again in March, when we start our seasons, instead of being on track, we're on the hill. So last week our athletes did 8 by 200 pretty fast up a hill, 8 to 11 by 200 up a hill, and then they alternate the next week. They might do something like 300s up the hill, things like that. More like 1 week being 800 pace, 1 week being maybe mile pace or something like that. And then Saturday, Sunday, for the most part, recovery. Some athletes can handle a long run, but for the most part, the goal is take one day off and take one day to get in some pretty easy running or cross training. Again, some of our athletes only run 3-4 days a week. So they're just not accustomed to handling a lot of volume. But yeah, on the weekend, it's either run, cross train, lever, just get in some easy type of aerobic work with the main goal of coming back ready to go on Monday and then repeating that whole process again.
Yeah. Yeah. So for you specifically with the 800 group, are you concerned about weekly volume at all? Or is it more so workout specific? And if we hit those, that was a successful week?
Yeah, I never count volume. Even when I was coaching like high school distance runners and things like that, I never really counted volume. I'd always like use it as a marker, kind of like to draw things out, basically to make sure that you're not doing too much load too soon. But I'll never count it week to week. Obviously, the one thing I will never do with any athlete is use that as a metric of, especially in 800. If I had to guess and actually go in the numbers, we've had athletes that have run, let's say on our guy side, we've had guys that have run 145 running probably 15 miles a week, and guys running 145, 144 that are running 70 miles a week. So it's one of those things where how can it be a metric if it's so varied between the people? But at the end of the day, we're always trying to, for the most part, increase volume to the point where you're not going to interfere with the ability to put force into the ground. So we use free lap on our Thursday days. Free lap is a automatic timing system, and to me, it's probably one of the most important things to have if you truly want to execute a sprint day well. And that tells us if those numbers get really, really low as somebody's trying to increase volume, then I will probably make some adjustments to try to avoid that. So we want to increase volume without and maybe during certain times a year that sprint level, those sprint numbers, the 20 flies or the 50-meter sprints are going to be a little bit lower, and that, and you're fine with that. But overall, if we're tracking it every single week and we see like really, really low numbers, even though the volume increases, and then you see racing is not clicking, you want to make those adjustments and things like that. So we're always trying to increase the amount of volume somebody can handle and adapt with. But yeah, always trying to avoid interfering with their ability to put force on the ground, because that's for an 800-meter runner is critical.
Yeah, and like you mentioned too, with them being like heavier builds, that's where you can kind of lead to injury a bit easier as well. One of the things that I would love for you to give us, just from an example standpoint, is I think especially a lot of our listeners, and I understand more so incorporating like the lever system with distance running. So like marathon, well, anywhere where 5K up to marathon makes a lot of sense. Ironman athletes incorporating it, a lot of that makes sense. But specifically for you with your 800 team, and maybe you can give us an example of what that actually looks like of an athlete of yours. How do they incorporate the lever device, and have you seen any like performance benefits from it in the last like 2.5 years or so of you using the system?
Yeah. So the best example I'll use is Vince Crisp. So he came into our program 2019, and so I guess this is year 5, I think. the first couple of years really struggled with increasing volume, and keeping it to be truly aerobic, right? Like again, if I go back to those 4.8 athletes, Vince is one of our 4.8 athletes. They can do the longer reps, but they're not aerobic. Like, some of our 8:15 athletes, again, can do 10 by 800 or 8 by K or something like that. No problem. Heart rate never jumps, super steady, exactly what you want out of it. With him and a lot of other 4.8 athletes, when they do those longer reps, their heart rate shoots through the roof, and it's not truly aerobic work. It's probably more anaerobic than anything. And I've noticed that through having 4.8 athletes over the years of their feedback after those sessions. So you can do things like we talk about with 20 by 200 and all those kind of things, but I truly believe you got to probably go, if you're going to race for a minute 45, you probably got to run a little bit longer than that. So it was kind of a struggle to figure out, okay, how can I get some 8s or some Ks or things like that in the program for these 4.8 athletes. And that's where lever has been incredible in terms of helping athletes achieve greater volumes in training. And if you look at the double threshold type training that everybody's doing right now, it's the same concept on a lower level. We're just trying to, none of our guys are doing, or girls are doing 2 sessions in a day, up to 20K of volume. But the concept of on those Monday, Tuesday days, we're trying to accumulate as much volume as possible, especially this time of year or in the fall, during those conditioning periods and things like that. So before using the lever, Vince could probably get in, and I just recently looked back at logs and stuff like that. He'd probably be able to get in like 6K work between those 2 days. So the Monday, base work day and the Tuesday endurance day. Last year, he was able to build up to probably double that between the 2 days. So like 5 to 6K on both those days. And on those Monday days specifically, be able to live in those heart rate zones. I've never, until last year, moving to Baltimore, there's not as many trails and access to soft surface like DC. So we kind of had to adjust, and we kind of had to implement the treadmill. And I've never been a fan of the treadmill until this past year, and probably because it's catching so much traction again with the double threshold stuff, and just a lot of high level athletes getting in a lot of really good work on the treadmill. And for what we do on those Monday days of trying to, again, get in a certain amount of volume at a certain amount of heart rate, treadmill's been great, and the lever's been even better because, again, we can have some athletes, they might, some of the athletes, the only reason they don't use a lever is because the treadmills we have don't go fast enough. They used it last year, but once they got fit, because the treadmill won't go faster than 450, it ended up not being, tempo type work for them. So yeah, and we only have one fast treadmill. So Vince, for example, yeah, he's one that always struggled with the aerobic side of the 800. And I guess the success story is, again, just had a great fall last year, which led into a really good winter. And was able to go to Albuquerque of all places, obviously 5,000 feet. So if you're not aerobically fit, you're not going to put together a good 800. And he was able to make his first final, and then finish third in that final, and made the final again this year, and performed pretty well at USA's, and just in general has developed a lot aerobically, because of utilizing the lever. And we have 3 to 4 4.8 athletes right now. A couple of them are new to the program, but with that group specifically, we've just been able to get in a lot of really high level aerobic work, keep it in the right parameters, make sure it's, again, truly something that's going to help you develop aerobically, and for them specifically, be able to, like I said a bit ago, make sure that they're able to come ready to sprint on those Thursday days. Because if they can, it's great if they can, I've seen a lot of athletes that they improve aerobically, but they get worse in the 800 because again, it's half aerobic, half anaerobic this event. So you have to have both down. So if you're improving on the aerobic side, great. But if you can't put force on the ground, you're not going to go anywhere. So for Vince specifically, if I go back to him, he's simultaneously been able to achieve a higher volume. And those Thursday days of the high level sprint stuff, he's PR'd in everything from the 20-meter fly up to the 150. Maybe that's carry too, but yeah, I think a lot of it is because he's able to get in those volumes and actually come to Thursday ready to go.
Yeah, and that's a great story. So really appreciate you walking us through that. And you also told me offline. So your new treadmill goes up to about 334 per mile pace.
147 pace. So
yeah, per 800, right?
Yes.
So I did my math right. So yeah, 334 per mile. So I mean, now the possibilities are getting a little bit more endless, which is exciting to follow along with. But yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned that made a lot of sense to me is, the double threshold, like everybody's doing it. Obviously the injury risk does increase a bit, but being able to utilize like the lever system to do some of the double threshold like work reduces the risk of injury just because you're able to, offload some of that body weight and you're not putting as much force on the ground, especially for, you're heavier for 800 meter runners.
Yeah. And just developmental athletes, like athletes that, again, going from 8K of threshold work and then, jumping into 2 of those sessions as let's say like a college sophomore or something like that, because you saw it on the internet, like that seems a little bit crazy to me. But if you have access to a lever and can slowly, it's just whether the easiest way to look at it is it's just been it's allowed us to with aerobic work. It's a slow build over time. The worst thing you do is jump into it. So the lever allows you to just like slowly improve the aerobic system with less odds of the worst thing you do with the aerobic system is get a stress fracture and miss 3 months. So it just decreases those odds.
Yeah. And I think, again, like your consistent mindset that you have towards your team, and especially like with some of your athletes that have been around for 8 years with you now is definitely proven itself, right? It's paying off. And a lot of your athletes are running really fast. What's the best way for us to follow you the rest of the season? Obviously big year, being an Olympic year. What's the best way to follow along with your team?
Yeah, our Instagram and our Twitter. Our Twitter, I think, is still, I don't know how to change it from our district track club. I think it's just 800, but I think the @ is district TC potentially. I don't know if I can send it to you if you're able to put it.
Yeah, we can link it.
Yeah, like that. Yep. Cool. But yeah, our Twitter is actually probably the best way to follow workouts because I stole an idea from an 800 meter coach, Justin Rinaldi, out of Australia. He's really, really good about sharing training information. And I wanted to do the same just because I truly believe, I just really want to help our sport and the 800 specifically. So we will post pretty much 3 to 4 workouts a week. So that Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we'll post as many workouts as we can, as I can, unless I forget days. But for the most part, if you want to follow, learn from a training perspective, our Twitter is pretty up to date there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think just providing more education out in the space and what's working really well for your team and sharing that's huge. So yeah, thanks for doing that. And also thanks for being on the podcast, Tom. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about incorporating a lever system into your training, follow us on Instagram @levermovement, or even follow me on Strava to learn how I incorporate lever into my training for ultras. Until next time, keep running.